Hello everyone, it's Michelle Patterson here with Angel Souls, and I'm going to be making a September 11th, 2001 memory video. This is something that I know a lot of other people have done, especially people who were actually in New York City and Washington, D.C. And before we even get started here, I want to send my love to every single one of you, especially if you lost somebody in the towers or in Washington or on Flight 93 or you know, firefighters, police officers. My love to you, and please know that if you need to talk, we have a great community here. You can always reach out to me as well. You know, please don't be afraid to say what you have to say, or if you're one of the loved ones left behind because you lost somebody on that day. Again, this is a community of support, even if you were running away from it. I mean, again, if you've ever watched any videos that somebody else has done and they were there are certain images that they will never get out of their head, and it has little to do with the towers falling. It's about the people. And again, I'll explain how I'm going to set this up, because there are several reasons that I want to do this. But my love to all of you who were marked so deeply on that day. All right, so there's that. So some of you already know I've been posting things on Facebook. I've just been feeling this weird, I don't know, just all these strange synchronicities and strange dreams and strange feelings, and seeing 9/11. And I had just made that video saying, hey, 9/11 doesn't have to be bad. And I stand by that. And of course that's true. But I've just had too many realizations and this emotional knowing that I have to make this video. So we'll get into it here. I do intend to keep the first part of this clean, okay, but I will not keep the second half clean. So I'm doing this first half. I've noticed, kids are doing their book reports and stuff, and, doing historical papers and things, doing their classwork on 9/11. And if this adds a layer and gets you some extra credit for your schoolwork, good job. There you go. So this is going to be from the perspective of somebody who was actually on the West Coast. I was in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. Yes, in Hollywood. But we'll get into that. And I actually decided to move to New York City after September 11th. And I'll get deeper into that too. But I basically felt like I was supposed to be there, and like I had failed people in New York by not being there. Even if it was just to give water or to give hugs or to, do whatever the heck I could have done. If I could have stopped the whole thing, I would have. But I don't know. I just decided that it was the worst feeling in the world to stand by and not be able to do anything, and that I would rather be right there, right as it's happening. Even if I feel the fear, even if I'm in danger, I would rather have that than sit 3,500 miles away and feel like I can't do anything. So again, we'll get into that. But anyway, let's back up to the story of that day from my perspective. I lived in, I said, Los Angeles, in Hollywood, right on the corner of Franklin and La Brea. Now, if you guys live in Los Angeles, I'm really curious to know if this stinking apartment building is still there. It was like a 1920s hotel. It was haunted. It was so haunted. It was haunted, okay? It was a creepy place to live. Roach infested. Oh, it was so terrible. One more earthquake was going to knock this place down. Terrible. But anyway, this was right behind and just down the road from Mann's Chinese Theater. So I was very close to Hollywood Boulevard, where all the touristy areas would be. On the morning of September 11th, Los Angeles is 3 hours behind in time zone than the East Coast. So I'm just waking up. I hopped in the shower. I'm getting ready for work. And I remember certain things like so clearly. It's creepy. Like I can almost feel the fabric of the skirt I was wearing that day, and yet other parts of the day are just completely blocked out. I don't remember, but I do remember being in the shower and I was washing my hair and the phone rang, and it was too darn early in the morning to be getting a phone call. So I started to panic a little bit, and I was like, oh wait, we had a little bit of an earthquake yesterday. And my parents would often forget about the time difference. They would call me in the morning to make sure I was okay. And sometimes it would only end up, on the news because it was, I don't know, it was like an earthquake that happened in another town, but we kind of felt it. It was a common thing, but my parents always called me. And I was like, all right, that's probably Mom. I'll just rinse out my hair and then I'll call her right back. I'm in the process of rinsing my hair and the phone rang again. This time, I about ripped that shower curtain down trying to get out. I grabbed a towel, still had like soap running down my face, and I ran over to my phone, and it's my boyfriend at the time. Let's call him John, because he's a big part of this story. He's a big part of my experience that day, so we'll just call him John. And I pick up the phone, and it was something like, Michelle, are you home? I'm like, yeah, you just called me on my landline. Of course I'm home. What? Why are you calling me this early? What the heck is going on? And he said, they're trying to get all the planes out of the sky. They're trying to land on the planes. The United States is under attack right now. And I was like, okay, this guy has finally lost it. It's been a long time coming, and now he's finally snapped. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Who attacked us? We're under attack? What the heck? And he's going on and on saying this has never happened. There's still planes in the air that are unaccounted for. And just so you know, because I know there's going to be a lot of East Coast people who were, you guys were really you took all of it. You took the whole brunt of it. But in the moment, we didn't know what was happening. So while New Yorkers are standing there looking up at towers that are burning and trying to make sense of what the heck just happened, the Pentagon had just been struck by what we don't know. And yes, I said that knowing full well what I'm implying there. We don't know what, it had just happened, okay, when my boyfriend John at the time called me. So still like a mad scramble. Nobody knows what the heck is going on. And he said that these planes were still in the air. I don't know, they were heading for Los Angeles. That's all I heard, was that these planes were still in the air and they were heading for Los Angeles. And he said, don't go anywhere. Don't go to work today. Just stay where you are. And so we're making basically a plan. Now, for those of you who don't know, the state of California actually started to pull together their emergency sources. They started to convene and get a plan, the whole bit, because, what was it? Was it Flight 93? I don't remember. I think it was Flight 93 that was intended to go to San Francisco. So, again, I know in hindsight, as we saw as history played out, you would need a plane. I can't believe we have to think like this now, but you need a plane filled with jet fuel in order to do what they did. Whoever did, okay? I know. I shouldn't go there. I have some strong opinions about this, but I shouldn't go there, not in this video. But we weren't thinking in those terms. This was unprecedented. Like, we'd never experienced anything like this before. So basically LA, was not maybe officially on lockdown, but pretty much everybody just stayed home. I'm getting phone calls because suddenly everybody was so concerned that I lived in Hollywood, right? So I'm specifically thinking about a couple of colleagues who wanted to come into Hollywood from like Burbank and from, I forget where else, outside of Los Angeles, to come pick me up and get me out of there. And I was like, I'm fine. Like, what do you mean? And you may not think like this in the moment, but there were a lot of people that normally go through Hollywood. And we have now since seen terrorist attacks, go on very like crowded areas. And again, that was one of those things that they were telling us to stay away from crowded areas. So it was chaos. It was a lot of chaos. I had a heck of a time getting through to my family in Ohio. When I finally did get through, they had been trying to get through to me to make sure I was okay. It was crazy. And the phone lines were just, actually they came on the news and said, please stop trying to call one another because like you're not going to get through. It's not going to happen, right? So I finally get off the phone and I'm just standing in my little tiny rundown studio apartment. No traffic outside. No traffic. The only things I saw going by were bomb squad trucks, right? And remember, there's still planes unaccounted for. One of those was Flight 93. And as far as we know, they're coming for Los Angeles. Nobody knew that. And I mean, obviously there were people that were, better versed on how that works and what was happening. But, again, just to be authentic to what was sort of happening, and us being in shock and not knowing what was happening. I mean, people were actually going, hey, are there any flights? Because we're on the coast too, right? And pretty much the military, even though they were late in scrambling their F-15s or F-16s, due to lack of communication apparently, there was a lot of attention being focused on the East Coast, which kind of left the rest of the country maybe not really open. Maybe we weren't really, but it felt that way. And not to take anything away, like we were sent, like somebody help New York, somebody get to the White House, somebody, oh my God, the Pentagon, somebody get there. But then there was this other layer of like, okay, but what's coming the other direction? That's kind of what it felt to be under attack. Not sure where it's coming from. And it's very easy now, so many years later, to look back and go, well, that was ridiculous. All the planes were out of the airspace at that point. One flight got diverted to Canada, I believe, and then the other one, like I said, was it United 93? Flight 93, and that went down in Pennsylvania. Circled over very, very close to my hometown in Ohio, by the way, which that adds an element of like bone chilling. I don't know how close they came to my hometown, but I have spent the last couple of days listening to the transcripts, and there's a part where they're saying this plane is now, I might have that confused with Delta 1989, maybe. I don't think so, but maybe. That was another weird thing about the transcripts, but we'll get into it. So this flight, they were saying it was over by Toledo, Ohio. My family doesn't live far from Toledo, Ohio. My whole family. So people I know probably looked up in the sky that day and saw Flight 93. And then I think it turned around Akron, Ohio, and then started heading back. And then it went down in Pennsylvania. So again, to say that there was just utter panic and chaos and yet numbness and, just all this stuff going on, I sort of shut down. Well, I didn't sort of shut down. I shut down. And I went very numbly back into my bathroom, and I started putting on my makeup. I put on my clothes that I was going to wear that day to work. And then I just stood in the middle of my apartment just looking around like, what am I doing? Oh, that's right, I'm not going to work. I don't know what to do. Okay, let me go check on my friend. So my friend lived across the hall, and her family, she's actually from New York. So it felt like it was an okay hour at this point. So I don't even know what time it was at this point, but I went over and knocked on her door, and she wasn't answering. Later on, when I did speak to her, she was a mess. And that's the thing with Los Angeles. A lot of people who were in Los Angeles had family or loved ones in New York. They're very connected cities. So it was still kind of happening in Los Angeles because we're seeing people we love, or they're seeing people that they love in New York City. I didn't know anybody in New York at that point. But they're seeing this happening, and they're too far away, and the planes were grounded. There was no getting to them. So there was like madness happening, right? With people trying to hold it together, but they kind of weren't. Anyway, so my friend, she ended up visiting me later for just a few minutes, and told me she had been sleeping all day because she couldn't function. So that's how she handled the shock and the stress. But I went over in the morning, tried to knock, she didn't answer, and then I just walked outside, and the sun was shining, and I just literally just in a fog and in a phase, just like looking around and just looking at the sun and feeling the sun on my face. And then I just started walking. I didn't know where I was going or why. And then I walked over, I think it was a school. It was like a voting center. And I was like, oh, that's right, I was supposed to vote today. We were doing like mayor or city council or something like that. I'm like, okay. And I just walked on up, and they greeted me. There was one other voter there. That was it. And I remember vaguely this guy saying to me, thank you so much for being here. It's very important to vote today. We're all going to be okay. And he was trying to offer words of comfort. And I don't recall, this is one of those times where I blocked it out. I don't recall actually going in and voting, but I know I did because I ended up with a little tag afterwards. So something happened. I don't even know who I voted for. Oh God, that's a bigger problem, I suppose. Don't vote if you're not completely present, right? Then I walked out, and I just kept walking. And I walked up to Ralph's, which is a grocery store chain in the LA area. And it was the one on, I think it's on Sunset, and we very affectionately call it Rock and Roll Ralph's because it was on Sunset. I hope it's still there. Guys, let me know who live in Los Angeles. Let me know if it's still there. But I walk up to this giant grocery store, and the parking lot's empty. And that doesn't happen. This is one of the busiest places that you could possibly go. Nobody's out. So I remember I'm standing in front of Ralph's and just looking at, I don't know why I kept doing this. That's kind of weird, isn't it? We get attacked from the sky, and I just feel this need to keep looking to the sky. I don't know if I was expecting to see airplanes coming at us. Later on, knowing a little bit more about myself that I know, it could have, I don't know. It could have been an empathic kind of thing where I was kind of taking on what other people were doing somewhere else. I don't know. Maybe that's getting a little silly, but I did. I stood there just kind of dazed and looking around at the sky, and the doors weren't opening. And I'm like, okay, they're closed. Where should I go? And I'm just trying to figure out where to go. And then I went to turn, and I must have stepped on the sensor because the doors opened. And I walked on in. There were only a few customers in there, a couple of cashiers. I went around buying things that made no sense. I didn't even realize what the heck I bought until days later. I picked up the bag and I'm like, the heck is this? Is this a piece of fruit? What did I buy? What is this? So I don't even remember going around the store. I just remember getting in line behind this one woman, and there was another customer, guy, checking out right next to us. And he was going off. The men here really, I'm generalizing, of course. Please forgive me, guys, who didn't react this way. I'm not trying to say every man is like this, but my father was doing this. This man in the store was doing this. A lot of males were kind of we're going to kill him. We're going to bomb him. And as now I know, a sensitive female, right? I was actually getting upset with that because I'm like, stop. That's not the solution. The solution is not to go off and kill more people. Enough people have died. Okay? Shut up. I was ready. I'm 5'2", never thrown a punch in my life. And I was ready to scrap with this guy. Just because I didn't want to hear it anymore. Just shut up. But he was still going on. And for the record, I did not hit him. Okay? I've never hit anybody in my life, but it was upsetting to hear him. And I had to kind of remind myself, he's hurting too. And this is just his way. So I'm standing there, and this cashier and the woman in front of me, they're, chattering back and forth. And then the customer, the female customer, she kind of leaned down and she's like, honey, are you all right? And I kind of had to snap out of it. And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. Right? Conditioned responses. Yeah, I'm okay. As well as we all can be today. It's been kind of crazy. And she goes, oh, I know. Do you know anybody in New York? And I was like, no, but a lot of my friends know people in New York. And that was about all I said about it. And then I was like, well, what about you? Are you all right? Did you know anybody in New York who you haven't heard? Or I didn't say did. I was actually being, do you know anybody in New York? I'm sorry. Trying to tell this as a historical story, right? It will come out in past tense, but in the moment I was saying, do you know anybody in New York? Or do you know anybody who was affected by this? And she smiled at me and she said, my son works in the North Tower. If I remember correctly, I think it was the North Tower. He works in the North Tower. I haven't heard from him. I don't know where he is. And then I'm starting to realize she's more stunned than I was. Do you know what I mean? But she was high functioning. And we all kind of stopped and we're just kind of, trying to be there for her. And I just remembered hearing on the news that all the phone lines were down in New York, and or they were getting overloaded. I don't know if this was the right thing to do, but I offered that to her and said, I did hear on the news that nobody can get through in New York. And she seemed to kind of perk up and she goes, really? They said that? I'm like, yeah, they're actually telling people to email instead. Have you checked your email to see if you've heard from your son? And she's like, no, I haven't done that. I'm going to go home and I'm going to check. I'm like, okay, well, we're praying for you. Again, I didn't want to instill false hope in her, but this is the other thing that I think needs to be talked about in that moment. Like, I think everybody knew, especially people who knew somebody in the towers, or, you know, one of the rescue workers, or someone in Washington or on Flight 93, they were going to have the rest of their lives to have to handle that loss if they were going to have a loss. But there was a small window of opportunity to have some hope. That's why you saw a lot of people out there with photographs. Has anybody seen my father? Has anybody seen my sister? Has anybody, you know, maybe they knew that their loved one was gone, but they weren't ready to go there yet. And I think, again, I never want to put false hope in somebody, but it just felt like in that moment, like she wasn't ready to go there yet. Nor should she have to. She didn't have all the facts yet, right? And just like, again, the people out there with the photographs, they didn't have to go there yet. There was still that moment where they thought maybe their loved ones were going to come home. So anyway, this was kind of this interaction with this woman, and she ended up walking on out. But before she did, we kind of had her, it seemed like she was kind of in a very stable place at that point. And then the cashier, she was saying past tense in that moment. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Where did your son work? What did he used to do for a living? Like, she's talking about him like he's dead. And we're all just like, oh, okay, girl, you know, we know you mean well, but, and I think I said something like, well, you know, what does he do? Let's not go there yet, all right? Like, you haven't checked your email, you don't know yet. You may not hear from him for a couple of days. We don't know how long it's going to take for these phone lines to get back up. So anyway, by the end of that conversation, she left, and the cashier looked at me, and she goes, he's dead. You know he's dead. You know he didn't make it. Ain't nobody made it out of those towers alive. Nobody's going to make it out of those towers alive. You know, she's just like, oh. And that's the other thing, too, that was, as much as I can offer it from this perspective, I felt was like a very true and honest, accurate. Not everybody was a big person, okay? Not everybody was handling it well. Some people who were terrified of death just wanted to talk about death, right? And I shouldn't say that she wasn't being a big person. That's not really what I meant. But you know what I'm saying? Like, not everybody handled it very well. Everybody handled it very, very, very differently. And again, we are in a different place. We're separated from what's happening. And it was not the same experience as the people on the East Coast, but it was just as, like, it was horrible in a different way. Let's put it that way. It wasn't just as horrible. It was horrible in a different way, because we're bearing witness. And like I said before, you know, people couldn't get there. They couldn't get to their loved ones, right? So I ended up going on home, and things were getting more and more tense as time went on. My boyfriend at the time, John, he had gone on to work because him and his mother, they worked at the same university. I think they wanted to be there for the students. But when he got off of work, he came over and got me. And he was just like, let's just drive. And I'm kind of thinking, like, is it safe? You know, and it was weird because he was more in like a defiant kind of like, we're not going to let them hold us down. We're going to go live our lives, you know, kind of thing. And I was kind of in a different headspace. But we get into the car, we're driving, we find one restaurant that's open. Now, we had not gone out with the intention, I don't remember, but I don't think we had gone out with the intention of going to a restaurant, for God's sakes. I mean, people have just experienced horrific, people lost their lives. People, beautiful, innocent people lost their lives. And every single person who loves them, there's going to be a part of them that's destroyed forever. You know, I mean, that's kind of what it felt like in that moment. And I'm like, I don't want to go to a restaurant. He goes, come on, I need a drink. Remember, he's in that defiant mode, like, no, we can't let bad people make us feel like we can't live our lives. So again, we were just on, you know, very different pages with that. But we ended up going into this restaurant. This was such a freaky thing. They had these giant, like, almost like Jumbotron screens in this restaurant. And when we walked in, you know, the hostess was like, thank you for being here. Good for you. You know, it was kind of like, you know, we're going to be strong. Like, LA strong, right? Can't be Jersey strong, but we're going to be LA strong, right? So we go in, we were sitting right in front of this giant screen. And thank God they were not playing the news. thank God, because I think all of us needed to unplug from it. And there were only a few other patrons in there, but you know, there were a few other customers in there. And I remember vaguely John, I'll stop air quoting. I don't know why I keep doing that. See, I started air quoting a long time ago to make fun of people who air quote, and now it's like a part of my life. You gotta be careful with that, right? All right, so anyway, John is sitting there and he's trying to get me to eat, and he's like, you know, when was the last time have you eaten all day? You know, having this whole conversation. And then I don't know if it was the actual screen or what the heck happened, or if I had a moment. I saw this giant flash, like right here, this giant flash. And I looked up, and there on this Jumbotron was the image. Somebody must have just sent in brand new footage, because up until that point, all we were seeing basically on the news was the airplane looking this big hitting the second tower. This was new footage. This was the up close of the plane where it gets up there and then it tilts and goes slamming into the building. So I see this like flash, and I look up and I see it, and it was almost like I could feel what it felt like to be on that plane, and the terror, and how it kind of, I could almost feel the sensation. Okay, this is where I might get a little graphic, and we might start getting a little graphic from here on out. Okay, so if you were trying to just get a few little notes about what it was like for somebody on the West Coast, for your book report for school, this might be where I leave you. Good luck with your paper. Or if you're just sensitive to these things, again, I'll try to remember before I say it. And I won't be holding back on my language going forward, because it's not authentic to the actual story and how things felt in the moment. Okay, so I hope you feel that that's fair enough. But anyway, so I'm like feeling what it felt like to be on this plane, and I could feel my chest ripping open, and I actually screamed out in the restaurant. I sort of was like, and I was like, oh no, you know, and then I just started feeling all these sensations, and I could hear screaming in my head, and I kind of, again, I'm sorry if this is like weird or graphic, but I kind of felt like impact, like this, and then felt like my chest ripping open. Pretty often, whenever I think of that time, I'm like shaking. I can see a woman's face in my mind, and she's hanging on to a kid who's probably about 8 or 9 years old. And then my boyfriend, he was like, you know, kind of obviously concerned and looking at me like, what in the heck is wrong with you? And I snapped out of it. And I think it was the waiter who came over. I don't know if it was a waiter, like the manager came over, and he was like, I am so sorry. Like, I don't know how that ended up on the screen. We tried to keep the news off. I don't know why that just came up. And I was kind of just like still in shock. I was just like sort of back, but still shocked. And I'm like, I hadn't seen that. I hadn't seen that. And my boyfriend's like, you haven't seen the plane go into the building? What do you? Yes, of course you have. You were watching it all day. I'm like, not like that. I didn't see it like that. And I'm like a little girl, and I'm like almost like rocking and freaking out, and I have my hands up like this. I'm like, I didn't see it. I didn't see that before. I didn't, The people in the restaurant are all looking at me, and you could tell it shook them too. And of course, this is LA, and everybody tries to act cool, so they're trying to hide. And it was embarrassing, and I still didn't understand what happened in that moment. So needless to say, we got the hell out of there. And I remember my boyfriend was like, you like blacked out for a second there. Like, where did you go? Kind of thing, And I didn't know. And I didn't understand it. But I felt an I don't want to use the word obligation, a duty towards every single soul that was lost on that day. Again, this is going to sound really silly, and I accept that, because I don't know how else to put it. I think I said previously, I felt like I was supposed to be in New York for that. I may have even had, oh gosh, I forgot about this part. Holy cow. We're going to get into all the weird 9/11 synchronicities in my life here in just a moment. I hope I remember this one that just popped up. Anyway. Gonna be a long video, sorry. I felt this this duty, like I was saying, to the people who died that day, I felt like I was supposed to be in the tower. And I say the tower. I don't know which tower, the tower. I felt it through every bit of my being that I was supposed to be in there. I was supposed to help. I don't know if I was supposed to make it, but I knew I was supposed to be in there. And I felt a lot of guilt, like I had let people down, like I had really messed up my life. But at the time, I didn't articulate it as such. This is more like as I kind of grew and kind of looked back and I was like, wow. And as other things started to happen. So I decided right then and there, at some point, I was going to move to New York City. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I was going to make it happen one way or another. And people thought I was crazy. Why in the world would you do such a thing? Did you not see what the heck just happened to them? Why would you move to New York City right after September 11th? But I ended up applying to graduate schools, 3 graduate schools, NYU, Columbia. Okay, I didn't actually think I was going to get into Columbia. But, like, if you're going to go for grad school, go big or go home, right? So, and New School University. I think New School University, if you don't know it, I think that's what the show Fame, I'm Gonna Live Forever, that's an old show. I think it was supposed to be based on New School University. Maybe I might be wrong about that, but I think it's where Parsons School of Design is. The Actors Studio used to be there, so on and so forth. I did also apply to other East Coast schools just in case those didn't work out. I just had to be on the East Coast. I just knew this. NYU wanted nothing to do with me. They totally full on rejected me. And there were some other things going on with the other schools, but I never heard from Columbia. Now this gets into the first synchronicity, I think. Okay, I didn't hear from them. So I didn't get rejected. I also didn't get accepted. I just didn't know what the heck was happening. So I went ahead and accepted my offer from New School University. They were offering a little bit of money. The program, New School University is a little bit, in my mind, gritty. It's like gritty artist school, right? I don't, and other people who've gone to other art schools in New York City be like, well, what the heck does that mean for me? But I don't know. It just has kind of that feel about it. And I went ahead and I took that offer and I got all set up in graduate student housing. I had no say over it. And I also want to say I was very naive about New York City. For example, I didn't know how big the towers were. I had no idea. Did I say this already? Let me backtrack. This is one of the arguments that I was having with my boyfriend on the phone when he was first telling me what was going on. And I kept insisting, all the people are going to get out of the towers. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. I would be so mad at him. I'm like, the only people who died are the people on the plane and the people on those floors. Everyone else is going to make it. The fire department's going to get in there. They're going to make everything okay. The police department, they're going to... And he was like, Michelle, what about the people on the upper floors? How are they supposed to get down? They'll go to the roof. They will go to the roof. They have helicopters. They're going to save them. New York City wouldn't build buildings like this and not have a way to save people. And oddly, some people, I think, did survive from those upper floors by coming down through the stairwell. Stairwell B. Remember? Isn't that the one where the building, disintegrated all around them and they looked up and there was blue sky? Anyway, I was very naive about New York City. I didn't even know where anything was. I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't even know Manhattan was basically an island. I didn't know anything. And I was like, what's a borough? What? How does that go? But anyway, I also didn't know where the placement of these schools were. So it was very interesting. I ended up taking Columbia is actually in, uptown. I mean, it's like in the upper part of Manhattan. New School University is down a little bit lower, kind of where the World Trade Center was. When I showed up to graduate student housing, turns out I was put in a building that had only just recently opened up because of the tower. So I didn't know that I was going to be living just a few blocks away from the pit. So the World Trade Center became the pit, ground zero. Okay. So that was kind of a weird thing. And actually there was a conversation I had with somebody who was actually displaced out of that building for a little while they cleaned up. And he was there living in that building when September 11th happened. And he said he was actually down by the tower, one of the towers, and all that started going on. And he said, all I could think of was my roommate. And he kind of laughed about it. He made a joke out of it, joke on his roommate, but I don't think it was very funny because there might have been some other things going on there. But he was saying, all he kept thinking was my roommate. He wasn't close to him. They didn't even get along very well. But he ran back to this dorm, I guess we can call it a dorm, ran upstairs, and his roommate was in bed covered in dust and debris and like not moving, right? Now, the way he tells that story, this guy I barely know, the way he tells that story, he's like, that asshole is like, he's such a deep sleeper, dumbass, slept through 9/11. Who does that? That was his take on it. But it sounded like maybe, because he was shaking him and he wasn't responding, and he was saying it was scaring him. And he like held him up, and like it wasn't until he like really started shaking him that he gasped and started coughing, and he got him out of the building. So he might have been suffocating in bed or got hit on the head with something. I don't know. But and this is where it gets a little graphic too. Human remains were, I guess, flying in to the building. And so, and I like, he was saying this. I didn't hear this like as an official report, but they had to collect that up. And then that's why it took so long for them to clean this building. So that was a little like, ugh. But yeah, that was the building I was living in. And while I was there and already had my classes, my financial aid all set up and everything, I received this thick envelope. Okay, I don't know if it still happens these days, but back then it was good news if you were getting a thick envelope, right, from a school. It was from Columbia University. This sucker had been through it. Okay, it was all ripped up. It had like all these stamps all over it, like return to sender. I don't know what the heck they were doing, because I gave them my the post office, I gave them my updated address, so they should have forwarded anything. And I admittedly gave up on Columbia University at that point. So I opened this envelope, and it's like, it was saying about, they were actually very nice about my work, and they said that unfortunately your application was incomplete, and so we couldn't process your application. We've already filled up all the spots for this semester, but basically they were going to hold a position open for me. And there were just so many questions, and I called up and I'm doing all this, and I even had my roommates read it. I'm like, what? And they're like, you got accepted to Columbia. I'm like, not really. I feel like I got waitlisted. I gotta figure out what happened. And there was no offer of money, right? Like, please, if I'm gonna get into Columbia University, it's by the skin of my teeth, okay? It's not gonna be a scholarship on top of it, and it's very expensive. How the heck am I gonna afford it? Anywho, I'm going back and forth, but I just thought it was so interesting. What ended up happening was one of my letters of recommendation, which had to be, I remember the rule for them, at least at the time, was that it had to be sent directly from an old professor of yours. The letter of recommendation couldn't go to you and you couldn't submit it. It had to come from them directly. Well, one of my professors didn't get it in the mail in time. It went into the incomplete pile until the letter arrived. Anyway, long story short, all of this stuff sort of conspired so that I would end up in a school that I feel like this is why this happened. So I ended up in a school that was closer to Lower Manhattan than the one that was uptown. So that was the first kind of like, what, the first kind of like, that's weird. And the building I was in was on William Street and Maiden Lane. Okay, so again, if you guys are in New York City, you know what that is. It's not far from Wall Street, and it's not far from the World Trade Center. So one of the first things I did, obviously, is I went to this pit, to Ground Zero, to pay my respects. I don't even know what to say. It's bigger than you imagine, both the actual physical sight and also the feeling. Yes, I could feel everyone. I could feel what happened there. I could feel the sadness. So I wasn't just picking up on what happened to the people, the actual victims, but all the other family members. And they had the chain link fence up around it, and it was just littered with, still 2 years later, missing. People were still missing 2 years later, and flowers, and then guys setting up stands to sell t-shirts with the World Trade Center on it. Like, it was just this weird experience, and I couldn't be there very long. And I also, just as a side note, yes, I've gotten that experience. Like, for example, I visited was Salem, Massachusetts. And I stood in the graveyard where the persecuted people, a lot of them, were buried. I could hear them conversing like as if you were sitting in the room with me and we're just talking to one another. So yeah, that happens. But going back to the World Trade Center, I actually really wanted to pay my respects to Father Michael Judge. And that's another little weird part of this whole saga. I had never met that man, never heard of him ever before, didn't even know what kind of person he was or the work that he did. But that day when I was watching everything unfold, I was watching Peter Jennings. I remember it very specifically. I was watching Peter Jennings. And the second, I don't know if I stayed on Peter Jennings all day. I don't know if it was Peter Jennings who announced that Father Michael Judge had passed away. And of course, there were the images of him being carried out by those 5 guys. I felt like someone just punched me right, like, in my heart. Again, I didn't know this guy, right? And yet I could feel him. And I could feel that he was beyond wonderful. You know, beyond wonderful. And I think now they're trying to work on getting him to be a saint. And I gotta say, I don't feel like that's too far off. And again, I know that's weird. I never met the guy. I know that. But even now as I talk, and even now when like 9/11 stuff comes up, his beautiful face, okay, just shows up. It just shows up right there. And he really was a beautiful person. If you don't know Michael Judge's story, there's plenty of resources on YouTube. And actually his name is spelled Mychal and then Judge. Okay. But I kind of felt, I vaguely remember him, kind of that feeling of him being around and like he was still ministering to people and he was still, if that's the right word, he was still helping. And like I feel like time hasn't really moved on too much for the people there. And I do want to say that as soon as One World Trade, is that what it's called now? When it was completed, right before I left New York, I went down and visited, but I refused to go in. I could not bring myself to go in. Physically, couldn't do it. Because I would walk in those doors and my legs started just trembling. And it was like my legs were going to go out from underneath me. I physically could not bring myself to come into the building. And there were souls that felt like they're pissed that the truth hasn't come out. Some were pissed that this new building is there because it confuses them. And that's not to say that these are like tormented souls necessarily. I won't say that. I don't know that that's true. You know, we know that souls will often wait for their loved ones or, you know, something of the sort. But they're not alone. And it's not as if, you know, Father Michael Judge hasn't moved on. I think there's just a lot about the other side we don't understand. And I do feel like Michael Judge is still doing beautiful and amazing things. And the lives that were lost on that day, they're still learning. And still learning by being, perhaps even being very connected to this physical world. But perhaps not tortured, okay? I just want to make that very clear. Like, they're out of pain, they're okay, they're being watched over, and of course they have their angels, you guys know. We talk about that a lot. Yeah, I guess we can kind of leave it at that with that part. But other synchronicities, my sister married a Catholic. Okay, this is another story, but hang with me here. My sister married this Catholic. She had to convert. She wanted me to be the godmother to my nephew Kyle. Hi, Kai. I love you, baby. But I wasn't raised religious, so I had never been baptized. You can't just go off and get baptized. Okay, it's like a whole thing. You got to go through, like, what is it, confirmation courses, and that usually takes about a year. You can tell I haven't really kept up on this stuff, right? So I did get this this Methodist minister, reverend, to agree to baptize me quickly with the promise that I give service to a church for at least 1 year. I didn't do no stinking research. I just found the prettiest church I could find. I know, it's terrible, right? It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. but I ended up getting confirmed by the bishop at Trinity Wall Street. Trinity Wall Street is the sister church to, I think it's called St. Paul's, right next to the World Trade Center. It provided shelter for the firefighters when they were, just trying to take shifts, just rejuvenate a little bit so they can go back in. And I believe Trinity actually served as a shelter as well. So that was weird. Didn't even know it. So I ended up living near the World Trade Center. Had no control over that. Just ended up there. Ended up at the church near there. Then I was an executive assistant for a very long time. And I always was the executive assistant for like CEOs and like, high-level people. Spoke to Steve Jobs on the phone one time. He was eating something, probably apples. I love telling that story because it was funny. I've always done that kind of work. So when I moved to New York City while I was going to grad school, I wanted to do temp work. So there was this really great temp agency that I had ended up developing a great relationship with, and went in, did my testing, chatting with the recruiter, and she's like, if this was just 2 years ago, you absolutely would have been in the World Trade Center. And I was like, okay, I need more information. What are we talking about here? She's like, yeah, like, because the recruiting office, they had different locations, the temp work office, but the one down on Maiden Lane used to staff, like most of their assignments that they would staff EAs for would have been in those towers. I felt like icicles going through every one of my cells, just, because remember what I said? I felt like I was going to be there, like I was supposed to be in there. And then she says that. That was the one I just remembered while I was recording. I had forgotten about that. Honestly, had forgotten about that. And I got a little taste of, it was nothing compared to what the people on 9/11 went through in the World Trade Center, but I ended up getting a temp job in another financial. Why the financial people wanted me to work for them, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it, and I also don't care. Like, if it's not my money, I don't want to hear it. Okay. But anyway, they loved me, and they always kept requesting me to come. I'm bragging now. I'll stop. I'm just kidding. But there was this one company, they kept asking me to come back, and we were sitting at work one day. I think I was on the 42nd floor or something. Again, nothing compared to the World Trade Center and being trapped on like the 80-something floor, but still. They came on over the intercom, and they were like, there's been a bomb threat. It's like on floor 24. Everyone must evacuate immediately. As soon as I heard the voice come on the intercom, like, we have a bomb threat, I kicked off my heels. I slipped on some little commuter shoes that just literally just slipped on, grabbed my purse. Now, these are all things that are dumb and you should not do if there is a bomb threat. If you have a second to switch out your shoes or just go barefoot or something, do that, because you can't run in heels. But grabbing my purse was stupid. But anyway, I stood up. Sorry about that, guys. I had to change the battery. These only last obviously this is a long video, so maybe like 40 minutes. But this is, like I said, going to be a huge long video. But you know that when you play it, right? You see how long it is? Okay, cool. But anyway, I was in this epic poem. I was telling you about this bomb threat that came on, and I stood up, and nobody else was moving. They all just kept on with their phone calls. They all just kept typing. One girl was just like a zombie, just typing an email. And I was like, aren't you coming? I'm like, come on, let's go. And she's like, I will when I'm done. And I kind of stood there. Now, there's this pressure, especially in New York, to always be proving yourself, to be showing that you're the best, and to be, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a thing. That's part of that drive that people go there and try to feed off of. I'm not saying it's bad, but in this moment, this was not the time to be doing that. And I just looked at her and I said, living in New York has taught you nothing. I'm not going to stay here, because if you guys remember, part of why there was such a big loss of life in the World Trade Center incident was because people were told to go back in. They were told it was safe, or they decided to just stay and keep working because they're trying to prove something. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that, people made stupid decisions on that day. I'm not trying to say that. I think that they were victims on like a couple of levels, and one of them is thinking like, I'm going to trust that it's okay to go back in, and also I'm under so much control under my boss that even though there's like a bomb, they thought it was a bomb at the time that had gone off in the World Trade Center, I'm going to still sit here and prove that I'm a good worker. I don't think it's their fault. I just think that they were, shrouded with misinformation and, whatever. So in this case, I was in this building in Midtown, and this bomb threat is happening, and I just started to go. And the girl looked at me like as if I was being too dramatic or something. So then, I get out into the stairwell, and this is mainly why I'm telling this story. If you've ever had to come down several flights, obviously you can't go into the elevator. So if you've ever tried to come down several flights of stairs, they start to not make sense after a while. And your body gets on this weird, kind of tumbling forward kind of, it's weird. I don't know how to explain it, but you start getting dizzy. You can't see where the steps are, and the rhythm kind of doesn't work anymore to get down flights of stairs. And I remember I had just moved to New York, so New York was a big switch for me, right? And I was still very intimidated by the city, very intimidated by people, so on and so forth. And this next part really shocked me, because this was the first time I really felt what the true heart of New York City was like. So I'm getting dizzy, and I'm almost falling down, and I'm trying to hang on to the railing, and I'm trying to make sense of the steps to go down. And this guy in a suit, right? He's a suit, right? He's like a financial guy, super hot, handsome. You've seen him in the movies, right? You know the type. Comes up and he holds on to me, and he goes, "You're all right, honey. You're all right. I got you." And he said, "Just look at the spot on the wall for a second. Just breathe for a second, and then I'm going to help you get down." And so I kind of stood there, and, I really had to stare at a spot on the wall until, things started to come into focus again. And then he stayed with me for a little bit, and then I'm assuming somebody else needed help, because he kind of looked down and he goes, "Are you okay? Do you feel like you can get down okay?" I'm like, I'm fine. And he just took off, and he went running down the stairs. And then we're standing outside. Let me back up. We had to go by the floor where the bomb was, and this, remember, was not. I moved there in August of 2003, so this was just before, the second anniversary of September 11th. So still fresh in everybody's minds, still a little crazy, and we had to go right by the floor where the bomb was, supposedly. So we're standing outside. We get outside, and I'm just looking up at the building like, oh my gosh, that was horrible. That was terrifying. Everybody else is just kind of standing there like, I got this conference call at 2. Are they going to let us back in? Jeez, kind of thing. My boss, who was off at a breakfast meeting that morning, comes running through the crowd, and he's like, "Oh my God, are you okay? We just heard that there was a bomb threat. Is everyone all right?" And he's checking on his staff and the whole bit. And he looked at me because, again, he knows that I just moved to New York City. He goes, "You can go home for the day if you want, if that stressed you out. You don't feel like you have to go back in." And he actually said to his whole staff, "None of you have to go back in. Everything can be rescheduled." So at least he learned something from that day, instead of pressuring his workers to go back into an environment that, may not have been safe, right? So just me having to come down 42 flights of stairs, I think it was 42 flights of stairs. I can't even imagine what it was like, if you were up in the 80-something floor and you're having to come down into the stairwell with all the smoke and the heat. And God bless them all. God bless them all. May they be rewarded for their experiences and for being brave enough to experience that in this human story. It's really unbelievable. So anyway, this last part that I wanted to get to really quickly, I've been feeling a lot around September 11th, and that's not typical for me. Okay. I mean, yes, I felt the pull to move to New York and all that, but since then, that feeling kind of subsided for me once I got to New York and I was able to pay my respects. Then it kind of was like, okay, well, I'm here. I'm holding space. I would have weird dreams. I would have dreams that I was talking to people. They would just walk up to me, and they looked like they had kind of the clothing that I would imagine somebody would be traveling in, and they just kind of, looked like they were travelers. Do you know what I mean? And I would have, so I felt like I was doing enough, is my point. We don't want to get all woo-woo with the story. But recently, too many things have been going on. I may have said this at the beginning of the video. It was so long ago, I don't remember. But most of you know that I made that repeating numbers video, and I said 9/11 doesn't have to have a bad connotation. It doesn't have to. And it was weird because shortly after I made that video, I started seeing 9/11 even more. Even today, somebody sent me an email at 9/11 about 9/11, and I read it right at 9/11. It was bizarre. And all these videos are popping up. I've essentially spent the last couple of days, because our memories can get so twisted by other forms of manipulation, right? I decided to go back, and I spent all of yesterday just watching old videos from old newscasts, like the full 2-3 hour span from the moment when they're like reviewing Maroon 5 and doing some story about Maroon 5 or whatever, and then they break in, and I sat there and watched the whole thing. I listened to the transcripts from that day with the air traffic control and the military commands, and that's available for people to hear now. And there were just so many weird things, and I've been trying to meditate and trying to see if there's like a message to come through. But here's the thing, guys, not everything has a definitive message. Not everything is prophetic. Not everything is a premonition. Sometimes it'll make sense once you go through it. I don't know what's to come, honestly. I don't know if there will be another 9/11 style event. I don't feel like it would be exactly like that. I feel like there might be some truth coming out that might sting, and it might anger us. But ultimately, it's going to put a lot to rest. It's going to really help families perhaps feel like they understand a little bit better about their loved one's end, and that justice has been served, truth has been revealed. And I just heard there'll be a settling. They'll just sort of be like settling into this. Okay? So I just want to offer that. I'm sorry, there's more synchronicities popping up in my head with this whole 9/11 thing. I'm right next to Cheyenne Mountain, where NORAD is supposed to be. Am I wrong on that? I think NORAD is supposed to be there. NORAD was involved in, I think scrambling the planes for that day. I don't know. There's been mention of that in videos and stuff, but I'm like, I ended up even like trying to get away from New York City because it just felt like my time there was done, even though I miss it terribly. I ended up moving to a place where I'm like right next to NORAD. And what does that mean? And also, as an aside, I dated one of the firefighters who was at the World Trade Center that day. I've served my purpose. But I just don't know what is to come with this. I just, I don't know. I just really felt the need to tell this story. And if I have more synchronicities, I will share them with you. I even went so far as to I had a dream last night about an old friend who I was friends with when that was going on. I have not spoken to this person in over a decade. It was like he was right here with me, and as if he knew, like I'm having these dreams. I'm having like people from my past are just popping up in my head, and they were all linked to that day. And just so you guys know, I went so far as to even reach out to my ex-boyfriend. Okay, I didn't wait for him to respond before I made this video. I don't know if he'll remember anything more, but that's how far, like that's how much I wanted to remember. Like I wanted to reach out to him and be like, what do you remember from that day? Like what else was said in that conversation? If I get any new information, like I said, I'll make another video, but I think we can leave it there for now. I'm going to go ahead and record the weekly for September 11th. And if you guys wouldn't mind sending some love, sending some prayers, not only for all the families who still want more truth to come out, they want more of an understanding, they need more healing, but also for the souls that are still hanging with perhaps St. Michael Judge at some point, and helping them learn what they need to learn in order to fully move on to wherever they are. Again, I don't want to make it seem like they're stuck. I don't know that that's true, but they're still learning, and they could probably use all the love that they can get, just like anybody. All right. Once again, if you are somebody who lost somebody in the towers or in Washington, if you were one of the military personnel, if you were a firefighter, a police officer, and you just want to talk about it, let me know. Reach out to me, okay? angelsouls444@gmail.com. That's the best way. I'm like addicted to my email, so that's honestly like the fastest way to get a hold of me. Or you can go on my Facebook page. Again, we have a beautiful community here, so I'm sure you can converse with them as well. All right. Thank you guys for listening. I know this was the longest video ever, but I do appreciate you letting me share this with you. It's not something that I've told a whole lot of people. Only on the occasion when like a New Yorker would bring up their experience and then ask me where I was on that day, would I even bring it up? And more often than not, when they hear that I was on the West Coast, they sort of shut down and go, well, you weren't here, so you don't know. So I've never really gotten a chance to talk about it. And I know there are other people out there like me who sat by watching helplessly while people were, our country was being violated. So my love to you, New Yorkers. You know I love you. You know I'm your sister forever and ever and ever. And much love to you, Washington, and everybody in the military who tried to help that day, everybody in the fire department, all the police officers. God bless you. May Archangel Michael always be with you and surround you and keep you. And for all of the medical personnel and the EMTs, may Archangel Raphael always strengthen you and help you to remain healthy in every single way. I love you guys and take care. Bye-bye.